So good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Hello, Brian from Tokyo. We have people joining us from all over the world. So thank you for joining us, and welcome to today's session where we will be talking about succession planning and bench strength. Can you kindly give me a thumbs up just so I can see if you can all hear me? If you can just let me know in the chat if you can all hear me well. Great. Okay, so for those of you who are in the call, again, welcome. And just to also let you know, we have members from all over the world joining us today. So good day to everyone. So did you know that 50% of all leaders fail in meeting their objectives? And we all know that leadership failure is a significant financial and reputational risk for organizations. So, what can we do to outrun these statistics and increase the chances of success, especially in the context of so much global uncertainty and economic instability? So, today we are going to explore a pathway to managing leadership in context, moving from a one size fits all leadership model to context specific leadership profiles, from static leadership programs to agile leadership processes, and from decisions based on intuition and experience to decisions based on data driven intelligence. So, to guide you on our path today, we will be going through the following. So, let me just quickly shift that so you can see our agenda for today. So, first is we will discuss what is succession planning and how do you build your bench strength. We will then look at the importance of context in succession planning and also draw from SHL's global research about this. And then afterwards, we will then show you how we work with various organizations to increase the chances of creating a strong leadership bench strength for the future. Now, this part will also include a live demo of our Insights platform to also give you a better appreciation on how we do this. And then lastly, we will wrap up the session with a practical case story of a large client that we are partnering with in this space. Now, a few practicalities before we dive in. So, just to let you know, in total, the webinar will run for about 60 minutes. This already includes a quick 10-minute Q&A towards the end. And then just to also let you know, this session is currently being recorded. So we will share this recording with all of you in a follow-up email. And then right now, you're all currently muted. So if you have any questions along the way, please do submit them through our Q&A box. And then if time allows, we will try to address them in this session. If not, we'll be sure to follow up with all of you via email, or you can also contact us after the webinar. You can also share your thoughts in the chat box. And then as your hosts today, my name is Det Arwego. I am the Managing Director of Assessment Analytics, or AAI. And we are very lucky to be joined by Nadine Butler. So Nadine is the SHL Solution Lead for Talent Management in the EMEA region. She is a psychologist by training, and she has been working in the talent assessment and talent management space for nearly 17 years. So without further ado, I now turn you over to Nadine.
Thank you so much, Det, and good morning on my side. If you're in this part of the world, I'm based in the UK, and good afternoon to you on that side of the world. It's really great to be here today. For those of you who are less familiar with SHL as a talent management specialist, at the heart of SHL is robust assessment science combined with technology. So this combination really allows us to bring the power of objectivity to every people decision. And although today we'll be mostly talking about succession planning, we also can't look at potential successes in a silo anymore. We really need all our people data to be joined up. So this is from recruiting people in the business to onboarding, developing, and identifying your future leaders. We know that people are really our most precious asset in 2023 and of course beyond. And we really need to have a holistic picture of our people to drive our business strategy. So today, what we're seeing is best-in-class organizations we work with are moving from this silo type of approach to combining their people data. So they can collect the data once and then reuse it across different challenges that they have. This really creates a combined and consistent view of their people to address any changing talent questions and the organizational context as well. Okay, so let's first focus on the planning aspect. How do we plan successes for the key roles in the business? And at what point should we start succession planning as well? So I think let's start thinking about what we mean by succession planning. And really, what we are talking about is an organization's strategy to identify and prepare people to take on the responsibilities of top leadership positions in an organization. And really, no matter what organization you are, even what country you're in, the industry you're in, the size, it's really a universal truth that people in critical roles of your business will leave. In fact, each year, 10 to 15% of businesses must appoint actually a new CEO. So how do we do this in such a way that means we're not at risk of losing critical knowledge and experience? Also, we don't risk having key positions unfilled in our business, and that we can ensure that objectives are met, productivity is maintained, and your employees are not negatively impacted. For most organizations, the process starts up to 2 to 3 years before key roles are vacated to ensure that knowledge transfer and create a smooth transition. And even prior to the preparation phase, we really need to identify a pool of talent or a bench strength to take on these top roles. Because if we don't, the costs can be catastrophic. A study of the world's 2,500 largest public companies shows that companies that scramble to find replacements for departing CEOs forego an average of $1.8 billion in shareholder value. More research still shows that the longer it takes for a company to name a new CEO during a succession crisis, the worse it subsequently performs relative to its peers. So it's really critical to get it right. And yet CEOs are being replaced badly in some cases. Boards are not finding the right people for the job. Estimates suggest that up to 40% of new CEOs fail to meet performance expectations in the first 18 months. In fact, for most organizations around the globe, succession planning isn't going too well. I mean, if you think for all the planning that we put into succession planning, it doesn't seem to be working in many cases. A fairly recent stat that you're seeing here shows that only 11% of organizations believe that they have a strong bench strength. So this is actually a 10-year low. And without bench strength, organizations are going to struggle to put the best people into those top and most important jobs in the organization. So before we move on, we're really keen to get some feedback from you and input from you and what's happening in terms of your succession planning. You'll see a question coming up on the screen, and the question is, how confident are you in your current succession planning in your organization? So there's 5 options to choose from. The first one being that you're confident that you have strong bench for all your roles. The next option is you're confident you've got a strong bench for some of your roles. Or do we have bench strength, but you're not so confident maybe in the quality? Are you not confident at all? Or is succession planning not really something you're thinking about? Do you buy in talent for C-level roles? So I'm just going to give you a moment to think about what the right answer would be for your organization. Deb, maybe I can call on you now, knowing your region. What are you seeing with organizations in your region in terms of general confidence around succession planning?
Well, I think in our region right now, it's really quite varied. So in terms of confidence levels, we still see a lot who buy talent, especially for C-level roles. We do have several projects that are ongoing with our clients where they do have that talent pool, but in terms of confidence level, they're still not very confident with the quality of talents that they have in their existing pool, which is why they have these development programs, why we run these development and assessment center programs to be able to identify how we can better support them in terms of building that quality in their talent bench.
Okay, great. So it seems like from your experience, some organizations are really trying to have that bench strength and that pool, but still maybe lacking some confidence that the right people are in those
Yes.
pools. And then of course your comments around, if people are selecting that they're really buying in most of their executive level
Mm-hmm.
talent, we do know that is quite risky and an expensive way to go about filling your executive level positions. And generally less successful. So it'll be
Yes.
interesting to see what the responses are from our
Mm-hmm.
audience. Not sure if we have any results to come up yet. Okay, there we go. So let's have a look. Not equally split, but I think it's similar to what I was thinking we'd see, and that's similar to what you were saying, that there is some confidence maybe for some roles in terms of succession planning. Many people, 33% also have a bench strength, but not 100% sure about the quality of the people in those pools. And then, of course, there's 22% of you who are not confident at all. And hopefully this webinar will shed some light of how you can gain some confidence in processes that you can take to improve. And then, of course, we've got a few people, 5% say they are buying in talent, and maybe being forced to buy in talent due to lack of solid succession planning processes. Thank you for your responses. Okay, so moving on. So unless your strategy is to buy successes, like in that last option on the poll, which, as I mentioned, really is an approach that's a lot more expensive and is much less successful from what we see. Succession planning really must come from an internal funnel of talent. So whilst we talk about succession planning, as I mentioned at the start, this can't happen in isolation. What are your talent pools that feed into your senior leadership suite? Where do your manager populations come from? And who within your individual contributors do you want to nurture as high potential for the future? So what I'm getting at here is that to be successful in succession planning, you need to think about your total talent management strategy. You need to ensure that it's joined up, that it's based on objective data, looking at both performance and potential. Why am I calling this out? Well, there's two reasons. Firstly, traditionally in HR, it has been difficult, and by that I mean labor intensive and costly, to collect talent deep in your organization and in a joined up fashion. So this is perhaps a little bit of a shift in mindset. And secondly, this is your funnel for successes. You could have the best succession planning process, the best development plans, stretched assignments for your people in the world. But if your bench strength isn't strong to start with, it's never going to produce strong successes. And I would also say it's too late to think about bench strength at senior and executive levels. Good talent may have slipped through your fingers, diverse talent may have been sifted out, and you are left with a very narrow talent pipeline. And what we're also seeing is that too many businesses are still relying on subjective, probably biased opinions of who should be promoted, who has high potential, and ultimately who would make the best leaders. We really need to start using data and analytics in place of subjective and biased opinions. So when we're thinking about succession planning, we need to be thinking about talent management. We need to think about all the different activities that we do in talent management and how we can collect objective, valid data all the way across the business. So particularly in light of the Great Resignation, we need to be thinking about how we retain talent across the business and nurture those talent pipelines for future roles. By the point we start thinking intentionally about succession planning, organizations should have a wider data set of talent insights across the business. Those who've been nurtured up to succession planning stages should have been a diverse talent pool with strong potential to become a future leader within the organization. We might even be able to find talent that we would never have thought to look for before. So, not to outpoll you too much, but very keen on getting your feedback again. So, we do have a second and final poll for our webinar. We would love to get your responses on. So, the question again will come up on your screen. The last question was asking around your confidence in your succession planning. Now, we'd like to ask you, where does your succession pipeline come from? So, you have 5 options again. The first one is we start nurturing talent from individual contributor level, so perhaps even early career level. The second option is we have a high potential program, which feeds succession pipelines. Option 3, we buy talent for senior roles more often than not. And I think for some of you, that might be the case. 4 is all current leaders, or all our leaders, all our managers of a certain level are considered potential bench strength. Or 5, we're working on it. So looking forward to seeing your responses to this. Det, I'm going to call on you again as an expert from your region. We've spoken around the confidence levels. What are you seeing in terms of where people are getting their successes from? Where do the pipelines come from?
In terms of pipeline, well, a lot was aside from those who still buy, in terms of those who build, for those who have started their succession planning and already have a pool of talents, most of them really start from middle management. There are some very few who actually start from individual contributors, but most who already have their talent pool usually prioritize from middle management and above. So more of looking at the key talents and not really looking at the entire scope of the employee pool.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting comment and probably similar to what I'm seeing, say, in the Europe region as well. Often there's a focus on sort of mid-manager and upwards when you're looking at successes. There is the question to say, though, as people join your organization, even from early career stage, even graduates, should you be looking then at firstly of who are those high potentials, maybe further away from those more senior roles, but people you should be engaging, developing, and nurturing from that early stage?
Yes, we do have some who do have their management traineeship programs, but these are limited to some organizations that are more mature. There are still some that have really just started with their succession planning, and
Yeah.
they are really starting at that management stage at this point.
Well, let's see if we've got any results. I hope you've all had a chance to answer. Do we have some results that we can see for our participants? Okay, so a little bit more of a mixed view here in results. We're seeing that the majority, 42% of you, are saying all leaders or managers at a certain level are considered potential bench strength. And there are positives to that in terms of understanding that there's potential for what? Maybe some people have more potential for specialists, kind of more lateral career moves within the organization. Less of you are saying that you buy talent for senior roles more often than not, but that's similar to what we saw in the last poll. And then there are some of you who do start nurturing from more, say, individual contributor level. 19% of you indicated that. Interestingly, 13% of you only say you have a high potential program, which feeds into that. So that's an interesting point, because usually identifying high potentials in a valid and objective way can really help you then answer the question, okay, out of the high potentials, high potential for what? And really start feeding into your succession plan. And then 18% of you say you're working on it. So again, I hope this webinar helps sort of align your thinking of maybe how you would like to go forward in terms of your succession planning. Okay, thank you so much for those responses. It's really helpful to see what's happening in the region. Now, let's assume that we have a strong, diverse bench strength to nurture and develop for future senior roles. It's time to turn our attention then to what we say the power or the importance of context. And I'm going to start by talking about what we mean by context. And what we mean by context is the contextual environment in which a leader operates. And we look at this across 4 spheres: the role, the team, the organization, and the external environment. So the key roles that you're nurturing your bench strength for will all look different along these 4 spheres, even within the same organization. Each leader will be tasked with a slightly different set of challenges in which they have to operate. And knowing the context in which a leader is likely to operate allows us really to identify future leaders who have the potential and the experience to be able to navigate those contextual challenges that we anticipate they're going to be faced with. For example, context in the external environment could include the country, the industry in which the leader has to work. Organizational context could include the business priorities and even the structure of the organization. Leaders can also be influenced by team context. So examples could be the structure or cohesion in the team. And role context as well. So that could be like job characteristics and even the psychological demands of a particular role. Now, whilst we see most organizations have some form of succession planning, 75% of business units don't have the leaders in place who can handle the company's future. And this is despite the fact that leadership programs actually account for around 1/4 of annual HR budget in most organizations. Yet our research also shows that by incorporating a leader's work context, the unique situations and challenges that leader faces, we can significantly improve the odds and the ability to predict leader performance. Right now, as in recent years, the future of work is still uncertain. I don't think that's going away. It is volatile, complex, and ambiguous. In the last few years, of course, we all know we've been through a global pandemic. We've seen and felt the great resignation. We've redesigned work to be remote or hybrid. And we, of course, have the strong headwinds of financial recession in many parts of the world. And if we look back 3 to 4 years, we've seen leaders having to respond to different types of challenges than ever before. The leaders that took us through these challenging times probably held the same job titles to their predecessors, yet the challenges that they had to face were significantly different. So what will our future leaders face? Gartner reported that most organizations expect more than 40% of leadership roles to be significantly different within 5 years. And when we surveyed leaders, we found that they felt that their jobs were more complex, ambiguous, and had more responsibility than ever before. You can see some stats here. 78% of leaders must work with more individuals. Teams are becoming broader, more agile, reporting lines blurred. And the number of individuals that a leader needs to engage with today is much broader than ever before. 70% of leaders report that they're having to adjust to more frequent changes than ever before. 63% report that they need to depend on others in order to achieve their objectives a lot more. And 61% are managing much more geographically dispersed teams. What this is telling us is that leadership is changing and becoming more complex and demanding. Leaders are navigating a different context today. So intuitively, we know that leaders have to operate in certain contexts. And intuitively, we can see that it's becoming increasingly difficult to even predict the context in which a leader will operate in the future. So what? What difference does this make to the success of a leader? And we wanted to find this out. So we conducted a 3-year study amongst 9,000 global leaders to really find out what makes them successful. And we did find it. It's context, as I've referred to. We discovered that when you take context into account when making those leadership mobility decisions, you're 4 times more likely to make the right leadership mobility decision. So out of hundreds of combinations of work contexts from product, strategy, team, and organization dynamics, 27 contexts matter most to making or breaking leaders' performance, up and down all levels of the corporate hierarchy. And just a snapshot of the research, I'm not going to go into this in detail. This was a snapshot of the research that was conducted. This research was conducted jointly by Gartner and SHL and represented one of the largest and most comprehensive leadership research studies in more than 25 years. And you can also see here that the Philippines as a region was adequately represented in this groundbreaking study too. So we distilled from around 300 challenges initially looked at, the 27 most critical business contexts which impact leader success. And you can see on screen here, shown under the 4 areas of drive performance, lead change, manage risk and reputation, and deliver results. So we were able to then pinpoint which natural attributes can hinder or help in any given context. In essence, we can increase the prediction of leaders' success significantly by looking at individual attributes and the fit to the relevant challenges. So we use these challenges to pinpoint which are the most relevant to a given leadership role, and then we can look at our bench strength to see who has the most potential to be successful against the challenges that that leader is going to face. Looking at this another way, we can also use these contexts for what we call scenario planning. The future is uncertain, and perhaps in your organization, there are a number of scenarios that you're currently planning for. Each scenario will naturally bring with it a different set of challenges. In this instance, you can look at your bench strength to identify who would be best placed to take on a leader's role based on each specific scenario. So whilst we can't be certain of the future, we can be agile and plan for different scenarios. To put this another way, what we found was that leaders thrive when facing challenges that are matched to their unique trait profiles. Our research shows that these context-specific profiles are much more powerful than generic competency profiles for predicting that leader effectiveness. So although there are definitely certain attributes and behaviors, I mean, an example could be something like conscientiousness, that contribute to leaders' performance in most contexts, there's no single universal or best profile for effective leadership across all contexts. Rather, the ideal mix of traits depends on the situation and the contextual challenges present in the role, the team, business or function, and the organization. So let's think about what this could mean. Firstly, we have a CEO of a large utilities company. So the company's been struggling in the economic environment and their supply costs are increasingly high. Many of the employees have been in seat for a long time and there's a culture of conflict. Merger and acquisitions are on the table to join with maybe similar businesses and drive down supply costs whilst increasing customer footprint. The company is unlikely to see high growth and is looking for stability. So we can see highlighted here some of the sort of challenges that would be present for the CEO of this organization. Then we have here a CEO of a medium-sized technology company. So the company is innovating quickly and they're leading the market. They've got top talent, they have strong growth targets through innovation, and they really want to be the world leaders in what they do. So maybe think Apple in the early days. The same role in these two organizations is going to be faced with quite drastic different challenges. And if we're preparing future leaders without taking account of the context in which they'll operate, you can imagine the likelihood of failure. It's likely that the successful CEO in company A would fail in company B, and vice versa, because the qualities that are needed to be successful in each of these contexts is so very different. Now let's think also about scenario planning. I have my bench strength that I'm nurturing as future leaders. I'm in my medium-sized tech company that I just mentioned to you, and today we know what is needed of the CEO. The challenges are highlighted in blue here, so this is what's needed from the CEO today. But we are forecasting a change in strategy. The company is looking to be sold, which would then become scenario A. But if it isn't sold, we will need to pivot strategy. We can't look for the same level of growth that we've experienced in recent years. So that would be scenario B. So in scenario A, we would expect what you're seeing in orange highlight, those sort of contexts are likely to happen. And in scenario B, where we're not sold, the following contexts highlighted in green are likely to happen. So as we're nurturing our bench strength, we really need to see who would be effective in scenario A and who would be effective in scenario B, because it's likely to be different people. So having our bench strength and being able to create context-based scenarios really allows us to be very agile in our approach to our succession planning. And you may have caught on to the fact that none of the challenge profiles we've discussed here have more than around 7 challenges each. And that's because when it comes to contextual leadership challenges, volume matters. The more contextual challenges a leader faces, the more likely he is or she is to underperform. The reality is that most leaders face multiple challenges in any given role. And of those 27 contextual challenges identified, we found that leaders at all levels navigate an average of 7 challenges simultaneously. Nearly 1/4 face 9 or more challenges. Our study also revealed that certain challenges are certainly more consistently difficult for all leaders. So things like frequent leadership changes, high uncertainty, low collaboration or low support cultures, and high conflict cultures have the strongest negative impact on leader performance. And of the leaders facing all 4 of those challenges at the same time, a huge percentage, nearly 68%, struggle with performance issues. So given the undermining impact of contextual challenges on leader performance, organizations really need to be investing time in measuring and understanding the challenges at work for their leaders. So just to bring this research to a close, before I show you how we bring the research to action, we have 4 main principles of a context-specific leadership strategy. So as we discussed, contextual leadership challenges directly impact leader success. Different leader attributes predict leader success in handling different challenges. So for example, again, in situations that call for growing the business through cost competitiveness, the best leaders in early career roles tend to be methodical, organized, and detail-oriented. They thrive on being busy, and they're competitive and goal-oriented. In contrast, in a work environment that calls for driving creativity and innovation, the most successful early career leaders are ambitious and career-oriented. They also enjoy being creative and being around other people. They tend to critically evaluate information and are generally optimistic. So the profile also of successful leaders in these situations also changes as leaders become more senior. Experience can compensate for suboptimal leader attributes. And again, an example here would be experience with integrating work cultures is really advantageous in challenges in which employees from different organizational national cultures must work together. In situations in which leaders must manage global or cross-cultural teams, or maybe lead through mergers and acquisitions, experience with creating a new inclusive culture and integrating workforces with different values and expectations really predicts greater performance. And then for point 4 here, so we know one leader's role can differ dramatically from another leader's role, even when both leaders have the same title. A chief financial officer in a growth business has a vastly different job than a CFO in a margin improvement focused business. So performance is best and risk is lowest when a leader's traits and an experience that they've got are well matched to the challenges of a specific role. Just move. Okay. So we've been explaining the importance of considering context, and hopefully it's clear so far how critical this is to do for your succession planning processes. Some of the further positive outcomes we've seen with organizations taking a context-based approach to succession planning are listed here on this slide. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but looking at things like diversity, engagement, efficiency, and performance. And really the main message is that your high fit participants to the context of the role are 4 times more likely to be top performers than those low fit participants. Okay, so how can we take this research and put it into action? What we've discussed so far may seem abstract and theoretical. It might sound difficult to bring into your processes. But what we really want to do is understand the challenges and context around our key critical roles, to create profiles of those challenges, and then assess our bench strength against our key role profiles to see how their personality attributes, as well as their experience, helps fit and helps create and predict performance. So what we do is we invite participants to complete the occupational personality questionnaire to understand their potential fit to the context of the role, as well as an experience survey assessment to really understand how their career experience may help them face and tackle the challenges of a role. And then stakeholder, aggregate, and individual insights are then available, as are individual development outputs and insights. Okay, so to bring this to life a bit better for you, I'm now going to give you a very quick demo of how this works in practice on the Insights platform to show you the insights that organizational stakeholders can benefit from and the individual insights and development guidance each participant can also benefit from. So I'm just going to move screens. If you give me a moment. Okay, and you should be seeing my screen. Okay, so I'm in the Insights platform, a demo site. And really the starting point here is to create a profile of a role that we're interested in. Just log in again. So let's assume the role of interest is a CFO. We've mentioned around CFO role. We've discussed with the subject matter experts in the business, what are the key challenges of the CFO role that we need to understand our potential successes against. So I'm busy going to create this role. And I'm going to call it CFO. And I've got my 27 challenges here that I can pick from. So I'm not going to go through these all in detail in the interest of time. But let's say that in the CFO role, they need to enable team performance by significantly developing staff capabilities. So I'm going to select optimize talent as my first challenge. They would also need to lead a team and expanding the network. So actually, this will be this one, sharing its work across boundaries and leveraging others' contributions. So I'm selecting drive network performance is also important for this role. We also feel they need to grow the business by increasing market share. So I'm looking for growing the business through market share and selecting that. And at the same time, it is an intact business. So we really need them to be able to run an intact business end to end. So I'm selecting that. And then finally, there's an expectation that they represent the organization externally to key external stakeholders. So that's the one here. And I'm going to select that. Okay, so I'm going to finish that profile. And you can see I've created a profile with 5 challenges here. And just as a side note here, very interestingly, we can very quickly even create an interview guide if you wanted to use this as part of your internal selection process, or even to validate people's experience against these challenges. Just as an example, I've very quickly created an interview guide here. But for now, we're in a position to create an insight with a group of participants that we're interested as possible successors for the CFO role. So when I go to new insight type, I'm going to be selecting contextual leadership because that's what we're interested in. Just give it a name of test. And I need to go and select that profile that I just created. So this is the profile of the CFO that we created. And now I need to select who are the people I'm interested in understanding as potential successors for this role. So I've actually already created a group of 9 people who are potential successors I'm interested in. So I'm going to select that group and I'm going to create my insight. So what we can see immediately when this comes up is that my 9 people we've selected have all been plotted on this table here. And we can see straight away that we've got 3 people sitting here, Eve, Monday, and Jill Ram, who are people we could potentially leverage for this role. These individuals have both the potential from a personality perspective and the experience to successfully manage the challenges in the role. Now, what is really important here, as much as there are 3 people we can leverage, it's really about drilling in on their data, individual data, and understanding the difference between these participants and how we could leverage them differently in relation to the role. So we can see here, if I drill into Angel Ram here, we can see in relation to the successor pool, she's in green and the successor pool's in gray. We can see very quickly that from a personality point of view, she's got some great strengths in terms of growing the business through market share and running an intact business and so forth. I would say that she's a bit weaker than the rest of the group in terms of the challenge of optimizing talent and driving network performance. However, when I look at her experience, I can see that actually the opposite applies here. She's got extensive experience in her career in optimizing talent and in terms of driving network performance. So it may be that she's certainly seeming to leverage her experience in things like optimizing talent as a natural balance against her predispositions. And this is also really useful to keep in mind as we think about the future, and also those participants who we may want to think about investing in for the future. Those invest participants sitting here are people potentially who are more early career. They tend to have, from a personality potential fit point of view, they're very good fit for this role, but they're lacking the experience needed. If we drill into someone like Torkel here, as an invest participant, we can see from a personality point of view, very strong fit across the challenges. But from an experience point of view, very different to what we just saw of Angel Ram. Torkel's really lacking experience across all of these challenges required for this role. It could be, though, if we think back to Angel Ram, that perhaps we could even create a bit of a coaching or mentoring relationship between Angel Ram and Torkel, where Torkel can be exposed to some of these areas and gain the knowledge from Angel Ram's experience if she shares that. So invest people may be a few more ways from this sort of role, but they're also the people we might want to be thinking about as our future successors. And also, if we look at the people in our redirect category, people like Paulina and Rodney here, whilst maybe having great experience, let's have a look at Rodney, and from an experience point of view, really experienced in his career against these specific challenges for the CFO role, really not a great fit from a personality predispositions point of view. So Rodney might be a great employee, really solid, committed to the organization. However, we may need to be thinking about Rodney for another senior leadership role. And then likewise, someone like Nikita, who's redirect, is really not a strong fit from either a personality or an experience point of view. Now, one thing I really just want to point out to you here is something we call hidden gems. This section really allows me to look further afield in my organization's data when I'm doing succession planning to really allow me to remain flexible and agile as to my options. It gives me other people who I didn't include in my initial insight, but who I've got data on, who could be potentially people I could leverage and invest in for this role. And we may want to explore these people as potential successors also. And very quickly, I just want to show you from a participant point of view what they can see as well. What I was showing you there was from a stakeholder side. From a participant point of view, when I log in here, Dina is a participant, and if there were any reports available for Dina in terms of development, these would be sitting here for her to access. She can also update her experience here as she gains it in her career journey. And she can also see where she has strengths against the specific challenges and where she has areas she can share her experience. And most importantly, areas that she may want to start building out a development plan for. She needs to gain some experience in some of these areas, and she has some gaps in these areas. And she can literally do an interactive way of building out a development plan with some suggested assignments against these specific challenges. And I can export this and it would come into a document that she could use interactively. Okay, so I'm just going to move back to the slides now. So I hope that that short demo helped you see the value of looking at succession planning with a contextual approach. This slide really just shows an overview again of what is available as outputs to provide succession planning insights to both organizational stakeholders and individual participants too. And what's also great with this approach and the insights platform is that if the context changes, you simply change the variables and run the data again. There's no more waiting for data to be rerun by a third party. You're armed with flexibility and agility to respond quickly to your changing context. It's really as simple as swapping, adding, or removing context to get fresh and immediate insights. I realize that we are nearly at time and we're hoping to leave some time for some Q&A, but I thought I would just share an example of where this contextual approach has been valuable and successful for a large client of ours. And then we can go into a bit of Q&A given the time we have. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is the Adecco Group. You may be familiar with them. They are a global, massive recruitment company. They employ a large number of diverse and talented people across the world. And like most organizations, it's of course important for them to have the right approach to identifying and developing their leaders. The Adecco Group did have a formal talent review process in which they looked at people's capabilities, strengths, and gaps. But this was very much a paper exercise and was only done for part of the organization. And when it came to actually choosing someone for a position, it really became totally subjective. It ended up being based on leaders' intuition. The result was they were finding higher numbers of external leader hires than they would have wanted versus finding people internally. So they knew they needed to change how they were identifying and developing leaders, and to do this much earlier on to reduce the higher risk associated with hiring from outside. So to remedy this, the Adecco Group turned to contextual insights through our succession planning solution. We mapped the Adecco Group leadership competency model to the 27 challenges that form the foundation of the succession planning solution, and followed with an assessment of their leaders' capability to perform against these challenges using the OPQ together with the experience inventory. They found that the most critical part of this new system was the contextual-based approach. They were really able to focus on what was needed for a successful transition and tailor people's development accordingly. They're now developing their people earlier in the process, and they have a better sense of the gaps in their skills compared with the challenges they're going to face in their new roles. So they can use onboarding and development to actively coach and support them. So this new context-based approach for them has overall led to greater confidence in mobilizing and promoting their internal talent. They're now always looking internally first, and they have a much more precise data about their people and whether they're likely to succeed in a particular set of circumstances. They have a process where they're able to leverage that data and use it to engage in a dialogue with their internal candidates. If they've been identified in a succession plan for the role, they can then look whether their career aspirations align, and they feel more confident about their mobility and readiness. So this benefits not only the internal talent, but the overall business. Now, we do understand that you may be in a different space in your processes from the organization I've just spoken about. And talent management is a journey. And no matter where you are on the talent management maturity curve, we can help you get started by infusing objective data and insights to inform your people decisions. I'm just leaving these up here. Some of the key takeaways from this session, I feel, in terms of implications for HR stakeholders. They were mentioned in the beginning, moving from one-size-fits-all leadership models to more context-specific profiles, moving from static leadership programs and investing in more flexible leadership processes, and of course, avoiding decisions based on intuition and moving towards more precise data-driven decisions. The evidence is clear. Shifting to a context-specific leadership strategy drives leader effectiveness in all levels of leadership, all types of organizations, and leader roles. So we're going to move, hopefully, to a bit of a Q&A if we have any questions. Deb, I'm going to call back on you. Perhaps we have some questions that come up in the chat if there's anything we can answer.
Yes, so hi Nadine. We do have some questions here that were sent privately. There's one asking on what are the key differences between the redirect and reconsider?
Sorry, what is the key
difference between the redirect and reconsider?
So the redirect are people who potentially have got some great experience in their career against the challenges facing a CFO role. We're suggesting that they're redirected and looked at for another role with different challenges, because from a personality point of view, they're not a good fit. Now, they could be people who can mentor people into that CFO role in the example I was using, because they've got a lot of experience to share that they've gained in their careers. And in some cases, that experience may even compensate for the fact that they're not a very good fit from a predispositions potential point of view. But overall, in light of their satisfaction in their career and their and where they're going, there's probably a better fit senior role for them. The reconsider people are people who don't fit at all from an experience point of view or a potential point of view, predispositions point of view. They're really not a good fit. And in that example I showed you, Nikita really doesn't fit the challenges of that CFO role from either perspective. She really is unlikely to be successful in that role due to that. It doesn't mean she's not a solid employee. She could be a top performer. She could be really engaged with the organization. It just means that when we look at her against another role with a different set of challenges, it may be that that is a role that she's better leveraged for based on her experience and her personality. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I believe so. Although there is a follow-up question on that, like in the case of Nikita, or those
Yeah.
who will fall under the reconsider or the left quadrant, what can they do with those individuals?
So someone like Nikita, who was maybe thought of as a successor for the CFO role and comes out as someone we should be reconsidering. As I said, I think there are other factors in play. We have to look at what are her career aspirations? Where does she want to go? What are her other strengths from a challenge perspective? Where does she have strengths from an experience point of view and a potential fit point of view? And start thinking, and this is really where the power of the platform comes in, that we can reuse her same assessment data and look at her against different roles, different critical roles that we've profiled in the platform, and literally do that at a click of a button to start seeing, are there other career paths or other career journeys for Nikita?
Right, great. So for the others, you may also raise your hand if you have questions. In the meantime, I'll just read on another question that we have here. Somebody asked, is there an overall assessment result that combines personality and experience? And what is the percentage weight for personality and experience?
So for the first part, we look at personality and experience against specific challenges in terms of fit as separate scores, so to speak, because but where we look at it overall is where the person's plotted on that graph. So if they're sitting in the leverage, it's because their personality and experience are both strong scores, and it's overall making them a better fit if you're looking at almost overall fit score. But it is important to distinguish, as we were saying, if someone's got solid or extensive experience against challenges, but not so much from a personality fit point of view, and vice versa. Those invest people, for example, if you've got a strong fit from a personality point of view, and we can see that in the score, but not so much on the experience side, it may be, as I say, that they're more early career, and many of those contextual challenges may be hard to get experience in handling if you haven't had a long career or you haven't been exposed to a management or leadership role even. The second part of the question, perhaps you could just rephrase that.
Okay, let me just, the question is if there is a percentage weight that is advised for personality and experience, like a recommended weight.
No, there's not like a cutoff score if we're going to look at it in that way. I think it obviously we would say that we're looking for people, if we're looking for potential successors, we're looking for people in that leverage category. I wouldn't want to move someone into a role today who isn't in that leverage category, because they will be lacking either from an experience or personality fit point of view. There'll be a lot more sort of challenges and development required. So if there would be a cutoff, I would say ideally you want to see people in the leverage category if they're going to be backfilling the role tomorrow. But if we're thinking about readiness and thinking, well, actually, I'm also looking future view, then I'm interested in the invest people for 5 years down the line as potential successors for this type of role. They could also form part of my succession pipeline, but with more of a long-term view.
All right. Okay. There's another question here. What if there are two very good candidates, both in the leverage, then in the end, they're all both okay? What do you suggest we do next?
Well, I think like any process, we always suggest a multi-method approach. Even if you're doing recruitment, you would always say assessments are really going to give you that objective detail and all those extra pieces of the puzzle. But in isolation, I wouldn't look at this and say, I'm I'm only taking the person who's in the highest point on the top right quadrant. I would look at my leverage people, if I've got 2 or if I've got 5 people there, and also consider other information, their career aspirations, their engagement with the organization. Those sort of, and even performance data can be looked at, but in combination, and then perhaps validating experience by using the interview guide in an interview process to really challenge people against those contextual challenges to make a final decision. So I think the answer is a multi-method approach is always recommended, but this really infuses a lot more objectivity in who you should be considering.
Thank you, Nadine. So another one, given today's VUCA environment, how would you deal with the leaders appointed into the key roles based on the context identified, based on a business strategy after the business changes in strategy, and consequently the context? Let me read that again. That was quite long. How would you deal with the leaders appointed into the key roles based on the context identified and based on their business strategy after the business changes, or maybe after the strategies in the business change, and consequently the context?
So if I'm understanding, I mean, I'm thinking I'm understanding there's people already in a key critical role.
Yes.
The context has changed, the
Changed,
strategy has
yes.
changed. What would be useful there is obviously then creating a profile. And again, just to point out, you don't always have to create a profile of even of a role. We've got clients who've created a profile almost of what's required at executive level based on the strategy of the organization. Identifying those key challenges that the organization's facing. Then I would take that leader, and we're certainly not going to say you're no longer in your role. We would take that leader and align them and see where their strengths and weaknesses are to the changing context, the new challenges, the new contextual challenges that are facing them in their role in the organization. And that's where the development side comes in. So I showed you very briefly sort of the online development planning, but that also needs to be complemented by discussions, by targeted development around those suggested activities to really build out that if it's a case that it's maybe a personality, it's something I can try develop or overcome or find strategies to overcome. If it's an experience issue and suddenly I'm facing a merger and acquisition and I'm in role and this has never been something I've had to experience before as a leader, it's about how do I get that experience? How do I get exposed to situations? Is that I can be teamed up with another leader who does have that experience, can help me and partner with me in terms of getting stronger in that area.
So it's actually good if we also have that data available so that we can easily identify who can be teamed up with that person too.
Exactly. And being able to very swiftly understand that our context has changed. This is how our roles are changed. These are the people sitting in role. They now have new development areas that we didn't know were development needs a year ago, for example.
Yes. Okay. So we're almost running out of time, but there are quite a lot of questions still, but I'll just ask one more.
Okay.
There's a question here asking if context only applies in succession planning.
What our research found is when we're looking at leadership, the context becomes more critical to understand. Context, if you're going to say more broadly, is obviously always important to understand fit to role, whether you're looking at recruitment, bringing people into the organization. We almost talk about culture fit in that sense. I think where it's less critical when you're bringing in, for example, graduates, because they're looking for sort of broad line competencies, usually sort of those soft skills, competencies that can be developed. But as we go, because we know leaders face very challenging contexts versus maybe someone more early career, it becomes a lot more critical to identify those. So I wouldn't say context doesn't apply to across your organization. I think that just the research shows it becomes absolutely essential to look beyond just generic leadership competencies and look to the context when trying to place leaders.
Okay, so thank you, Nadine. We do still have some questions, but we will respond to them via email if you don't mind. Maybe we can accommodate.
Happy to offer some thoughts, and you can get that out on email. Yes.
Yes. So thank you. So for those who have sent their questions across, we'll answer them via email if you don't mind. So once again, we'd like to thank, of course, Nadine for spending your morning with us and for also sharing your insights with us. We'd also like to thank everyone for joining us today as we discussed succession planning. We do have a poll right now. We would appreciate if you can give us your feedback on the survey. Please do wait for the follow-up email that we will be sending. It will have a copy of the recording as well as a copy of a white paper that we have promised when we sent out the invitation. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon and this morning for those of us who are joining us from Europe. And good day to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.